Carols and Corpses, a Hamish Macbeth mystery. Good evening, dear friends. My name is Stephen, and welcome to Mindful Musings. I invite you to pour yourself something warm, find a comfortable seat, and let the world outside fade for a while. Tonight, we journey to the Highland village of Lochdub, where the Christmas season brings not just joy and carols, but something far more sinister. It's December, and the church bells should ring with celebration, but instead, they toll for murder. A tyrannical choir director lies dead in the bell tower, strangled with the very tinsel meant to decorate for the season. Join me as we follow Police Constable Hamish Macbeth through the snow-dusted streets and into the hearts of those who sing so sweetly, yet harbour such dark secrets. Before we begin, I do hope you'll subscribe to join me on these journeys into mystery and the human heart. Now, let us step into the cold December night and discover what happened when the music stopped. Chapter 1. The Silent Night That Wasn't. The snow had come early to Lochdub that December, transforming the Highland village into something from a Victorian Christmas card. Police Constable Hamish Macbeth stood outside the church, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, and listened to what could only be described as musical warfare. From inside the stone building came the sound of voices raised in song, or at least attempting song. The choir was murdering Silent Night with such enthusiasm that Hamish suspected the original composer was turning in his grave. Then came a voice that cut through the carol like a knife through butter, sharp and unmistakably furious. That was Moira Blackwood, the church choir director, and she was not pleased. Again she shrieked, her voice carrying clearly through the heavy wooden doors. "You sound like cats being strangled." From the top, and this time, try not to embarrass yourselves and the Lord in equal measure. Hamish winced. He had been in Lochdub long enough to know that Moira Blackwood was about as popular as a tax collector at a wedding. She had arrived in the village 3 years ago from Edinburgh, armed with a music degree and an ego the size of Ben Nevis. Within 6 months, she had transformed the church choir from a cheerful group of enthusiastic amateurs into a rigid, fear-driven ensemble that sang beautifully but hated every minute of it. His dog Lugs, a peculiar beast, with one ear that stood up and one that flopped down, whined softly at his feet. Even the dog could sense the tension emanating from the church. "Aye, I know," Hamish murmured, reaching down to scratch behind those mismatched ears. She is a piece of work, that one. He had not come to the church to listen to choir practice. He had come because Mrs. Wellington, the minister's wife, had asked him to have a word with Moira about her treatment of the singers. Apparently, 3 choir members had quit in the past week alone, and with the Christmas Eve service only 2 days away, the situation was becoming desperate. The door burst open and a woman stumbled out, tears streaming down her face. It was Ailsa Murray, the postmistress, a sweet-natured woman in her 50s who had sung in the choir for 20 years. "I cannot do it any more, Constable," she sobbed, not even seeming surprised to see him there. "That woman is a monster, an absolute monster. She told me I sing like a wounded sheep and that I'm ruining Christmas for the entire village." Hamish felt his jaw tighten. There was a difference between high standards and cruelty, and Moira Blackwood had crossed that line months ago. "Go home, Ailsa," he said gently. "Have some tea. I'll have a word with her." "Good luck," Ailsa said bitterly, wiping her eyes. "But I warn you, Constable, that woman has no heart. Someone should string her up with her precious Christmas decorations and see how she likes it." She hurried off into the snowy night, leaving Hamish staring after her with a troubled expression. He had heard similar sentiments from half the choir over the past few weeks. The woman seemed to have a gift for making enemies. Inside the church, the singing had stopped. Hamish pushed open the door and stepped into the warmth, Lugs padding beside him. The interior was already decorated for Christmas, garlands of holly and ivy draped along the pews, and great loops of silver tinsel hanging from the pillars. The scent of pine and candle wax filled the air. The choir stood in the chancel, looking exhausted and miserable. There was Donald MacLeod, the pharmacist, a quiet man who sang tenor. Beside him stood young Jamie Ferguson, barely 18, whose clear soprano voice was the envy of the village. Mrs. Fiona Bruce, the doctor's wife, clutched her music folder with white knuckles, and there, At the organ sat elderly Archie Grant, who had been the church organist for 40 years and looked like he wanted to retire immediately. At the front, arms crossed and face twisted with disgust, stood Moira Blackwood herself. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, handsome rather than pretty, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes like chips of ice. "Constable Macbeth," she said, her tone suggesting she had just discovered something unpleasant on her shoe. "To what do we owe this interruption?" "I need a word, Miss Blackwood," Hamish said pleasantly. "In private, if you don't mind." Her eyes narrowed. "I am conducting a rehearsal. Whatever it is can wait." "It cannot," Hamish said, his voice still pleasant, but with an edge of steel beneath it. "Now, please." The choir members exchanged glances, hope flickering in their tired eyes. Perhaps someone was finally going to stand up to the tyrant. Moira's face flushed with anger, but she turned to the choir. "Take 10 minutes, she snapped, "and when you return, I expect improvement." She stalked down the aisle toward Hamish, radiating fury with every step. Chapter 2. Harmonies and Hatreds. Moira Blackwood followed Hamish into the small vestry at the back of the church, her heels clicking sharply on the stone floor. Luggs wisely chose to remain in the nave, settling himself near the radiator with the air of a dog who knew when to make himself scarce. The vestry was cramped and cold, lined with shelves holding choir robes and stacks of hymn books. A small window looked out onto the graveyard, where snow was beginning to fall more heavily, covering the ancient headstones like a blessing. "Well?" Moira demanded, crossing her arms. "What is so urgent that you must interrupt my rehearsal?" Hamish studied her for a moment. Up close he could see the lines of stress around her mouth, the dark circles under her eyes that even makeup could not quite hide. This was a woman under pressure, though whether from her own expectations or something else he could not tell. "I've had complaints," he said mildly, "about your treatment of the choir members." Her laugh was harsh. "Of course you have. Let me guess. Elsa Murray, crying about how I hurt her feelings. Or perhaps Donald MacLeod, whining that I expect him to actually learn the music instead of fumbling through it." "They are volunteers, Miss Blackwood," Hamish said. "They give their time freely to make the church service beautiful. They deserve respect." "They deserve to be told the truth," Moira shot back. "They are mediocre at best. Half of them cannot read music, and the other half cannot hold a tune. Do you know what it's like to try to create something beautiful with such inferior materials?" "Then perhaps you should find a different choir," Hamish suggested. "Or perhaps they should find a different choir director," Moira said coldly. "Is that what you came to tell me? That the delicate flowers of Lochdub want me gone?" "I came to ask you to treat people with kindness," Hamish said. "Christmas is meant to be a season of goodwill. Instead, you are making these people miserable." "Goodwill does not create excellence," Moira said. "Discipline does. Standards do. If I have to push them harder than they like, so be it. The Christmas Eve service will be perfect, or it will not happen at all." "You cannot cancel the service," Hamish said, surprised. "Watch me," Moira said. "I will tell Reverend Morrison that the choir is not ready, and I will be right. Unless, of course, they decide to actually put in the work required." Hamish felt his patience wearing thin. This woman was impossible. He could see why the entire choir wanted to throttle her. "I am giving you a warning," he said quietly. "If one more person lodges a complaint about your behaviour, I will speak to Reverend Morrison myself about finding a replacement." Moira's eyes blazed. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," Hamish said. They stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them crackling with hostility. Then Moira smiled, a cold expression that did not reach her eyes. "You think you are protecting them," she said softly, "but you are just enabling their mediocrity. This village, this choir, this entire backwards corner of Scotland, it is all so proud of its low standards. Well, I refuse to accept them. I will create something beautiful here, whether anyone appreciates it or not." She turned and walked back into the church, leaving Hamish standing in the vestry with an uneasy feeling in his gut. There was something almost fanatical in the woman's determination, something that went beyond mere perfectionism. He returned to the nave to find the choir members gathered in a nervous huddle near the font. They looked up hopefully as he approached. "Well," Donald MacLeod asked, "did you convince her to ease up?" Hamish shook his head. I'm afraid she is determined to have things her way, but I did warn her that I would speak to the Reverend if there are more complaints. Fat lot of good that will do, muttered Fiona Bruce. Morrison is terrified of her. She threatened to quit last month when he suggested the choir might sing some traditional carols instead of all those obscure pieces she loves. He backed down in 5 minutes. Jamie Ferguson, the young soprano, spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. She is going to ruin Christmas. My whole family is coming to the service, and she has me singing this impossible solo. If I mess it up, she'll humiliate me in front of everyone. Hamish felt a surge of anger on behalf of these decent people. Moira Blackwood was not just demanding excellence. She was wielding her position like a weapon, using people's love of music and tradition to control and belittle them. Have you considered going to the Reverend as a group, he suggested. If you all present a united front. We tried that last year, Archie Grant said from the organ bench, his weathered face sad. She convinced him we were just lazy and unwilling to put in the work. Morrison may be a good minister, but he knows nothing about music. He believes whatever she tells him. The church door opened, letting in a swirl of snow, and Moira's voice rang out sharply. Break is over. Back to your places. And Donald, if you cannot remember the entrance for O Holy Night, I will give your solo to someone who can. The choir members trudged back to their positions like condemned prisoners approaching the scaffold. Hamish watched them go, his mind already working. This situation was heading somewhere dark, he could feel it. When people were pushed too far, when resentment built up with nowhere to go, eventually something gave way. He collected lugs and headed for the door, but before he left, he glanced back at the scene. Moira stood before her choir like a general before troops, her face hard and unforgiving. The tinsel hanging from the pillars caught the light, glittering silver and beautiful. It would be ironic, Hamish thought, if something as festive as Christmas decorations became involved in whatever trouble was brewing. He pushed the thought aside and stepped out into the snowy night, not knowing that within 24 hours his dark premonition would prove terrifyingly accurate. Chapter 3. The bell tower beckons. The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold, the kind of Highland winter day where the sun shone brilliantly, but provided no warmth whatsoever. Hamish stood in his kitchen, frying bacon for himself and lugs, and trying not to think about Moira Blackwood and her miserable choir. It was Christmas Eve, as Mrs. Wellington cheerfully called it, and the village was in full festive preparation. Shops had extended their hours, the hotel was serving mulled wine, and children were sledding down the hill behind the school with shrieks of joy. His mobile phone rang just as he was settling down with his tea. It was Reverend Morrison, and the man's voice carried an edge of panic. "Hamish, I need you at the church right away. There has been an incident." "What kind of incident?" Hamish asked, already reaching for his jacket. "It is Moira," the Reverend said. "She's locked in the bell tower and refuses to come down. She says the choir is hopeless and she's cancelling the Christmas Eve service. I have tried reasoning with her, but she will not listen." Hamish suppressed a sigh. Of course she was. The woman seemed constitutionally incapable of not causing drama. "I will be there in 5 minutes," he said. The church looked peaceful in the morning light, snow covering its ancient roof and icicles hanging from the eaves like crystal daggers. But inside, chaos reigned. Hamish found Reverend Morrison standing at the base of the bell tower stairs, looking up at the locked door above with the expression of a man who had reached the end of his rope. Morrison was a mild-mannered man in his 60s, more comfortable with theology than confrontation. His white hair stood on end where he had been running his hands through it, and his clerical collar sat slightly askew. "She went up there at 7 this morning," he said desperately. "She has the only key, and she says she will not come down until the choir agrees to her demands." "What demands?" Hamish asked. "A complete replacement of half the singers, additional rehearsals every day until Christmas, and total control over the service music with no input from anyone else." "That is ridiculous," Hamish said. "I know," Morrison said miserably, "but what can I do? Without her, there is no Christmas Eve service. She has all the music, all the arrangements. The choir cannot function without her." From above came the sound of movement, and then Moira's voice rang down the stairwell, cold and imperious. "Is that Constable Macbeth? Come up, please. I will speak to you, but only you. The Reverend has proven himself useless." Morrison flinched at the insult, but said nothing. Hamish patted his shoulder sympathetically and began climbing the narrow stone stairs that spiralled up into the tower. The bell tower was older than the main church, dating back to medieval times. The stairs were worn smooth by centuries of feet, and the walls were thick enough to muffle sound. It was cold in the stairwell, and Hamish's breath misted in the dim light filtering down from above. At the top he found a heavy wooden door secured with an ancient iron lock. He knocked firmly. "Miss Blackwood, open the door, please." There was a pause, then the sound of the key turning. The door swung open to reveal Moira Blackwood standing in the centre of the bell chamber, wrapped in a heavy coat and looking entirely too pleased with herself. The bell chamber was a stone room, perhaps 15 feet square, with the great church bell hanging in the centre. Narrow windows looked out over the village in 4 directions, and the floor was wooden, worn and creaking. Decorations for the church service were stacked in one corner, boxes of tinsel and garlands and the Christmas star that would top the tree. "Constable," Moira said, "I assume you have come to arrest me for disturbing the peace or some such nonsense." "I have come to ask you to stop this foolishness and come down," Hamish said. "You cannot hold the church hostage." "Cannot I?" Moira said. "Watch me. I have given 3 years of my life to this choir, trying to create something beautiful in this cultural wasteland. And what do I get? Incompetence, laziness, and now complaints to the police. Well, I am done. If they want a Christmas Eve service, they will meet my terms." Hamish studied her carefully. There was something almost manic in her eyes, a wildness that had not been there yesterday. The woman was clearly under some kind of strain that went beyond mere perfectionism. "What is really going on here?" he asked quietly. "This is not about the choir, is it?" For a moment Moira's face crumpled, and Hamish saw genuine pain flash across her features. Then the mask slammed back into place, harder than ever. "Everything is about the choir," she said coldly. "Music is all that matters. It is the only thing in this world that can be perfect, if people would just try hard enough." "No," Hamish said. "People cannot be perfect, and punishing them for it will not change that." "Then they do not deserve beauty," Moira said. She turned away from him, walking to the window that looked out over the village. Snow had begun falling again, soft and silent, covering Lochdub in white. "You should go, Constable," she said, without turning around. "I need time to think. Tell the Reverend I will give him my decision by this evening." Hamish wanted to argue further, but something in her voice stopped him. The woman was brittle, fragile in a way that suggested pushing her now might shatter something beyond repair. "I will come back this afternoon," he said. "But Miss Blackwood, this cannot continue. You must see that." She said nothing, just stood staring out at the falling snow. Hamish descended the stairs to find Morrison waiting anxiously below. "Well?" the Reverend asked. "Give her until this evening," Hamish said. "She may come to her senses." But as he walked back through the church, past the tinsel and the holly and all the trappings of Christmas joy, Hamish felt a cold certainty settling in his bones. Moira Blackwood was not going to come to her senses. Whatever demons drove her, they had her firmly in their grip, and in a village full of people who had excellent reasons to hate her, that made her very dangerous indeed. Chapter 4. Rehearsal of Resentments. By afternoon, word had spread through Lochdub that Moira Blackwood had barricaded herself in the bell tower and was threatening to cancel Christmas Eve service. The village reacted with a mixture of fury and grim satisfaction, and Hamish found himself fielding phone calls from concerned parishioners all day. Mrs. Wellington called to say that if Moira ruined Christmas for the children, she would personally see to it that the woman was driven out of Lochdub on a rail. The Curry sisters, ancient spinsters who disapproved of almost everything, called to say that while they did not approve of Moira's methods, they understood her frustration with low standards. Even Blair, his superior in Strathbane, somehow got wind of the situation and called to tell Hamish not to let some deranged choir director make him look incompetent. Through it all, Hamish tried to focus on his regular duties, but his mind kept returning to that bell tower and the troubled woman inside it. There was a piece of this puzzle he was missing, something that would explain Moira's increasingly erratic behaviour. At 3 o'clock, he decided to do what he always did when he needed information in Lochdub. He went to see the Curry sisters. Nessie and Jessie Curry lived in a neat cottage on the edge of the village, surrounded by a garden that was their pride and joy in summer, and a dormant testimony to their gardening skills in winter. They were identical twins, impossible to tell apart, who spoke in a peculiar echoing pattern where Jessie would repeat the end of Nessie's sentences. They welcomed Hamish with tea and shortbread, settling him in their overheated parlour with the air of women who knew exactly why he had come. "You want to know about Moira Blackwood," Nessie said. "About Moira Blackwood," Jessie echoed. "What can you tell me?" Hamish asked. "Has she always been like this?" "Not always," Nessie said thoughtfully. "When she first arrived, she was strict, yes, but not cruel." "Not cruel," Jessie agreed. "What changed?" Hamish asked. The sisters exchanged a glance, one of those wordless communications that twins seem to master. "About 6 months ago," Nessie said. "She received a letter. We know because we saw her at the post office, and she went quite pale when she opened it." "Quite pale," Jessie confirmed. "Do you know what was in the letter?" Hamish asked. Both sisters shook their heads. "But after that, she became harder," Nessie said. "More demanding, as if she was trying to prove something." "To prove something," Jessie said. Hamish filed this away. A letter 6 months ago that had upset Moira enough to change her behaviour. That was worth investigating. "What about her background?" he asked. "What do you know about her life before Lochdub?" "She came from Edinburgh," Nessie said. "Studied music at the university there. She was supposed to have a brilliant career from what we heard." "A brilliant career," Jessie said. "Supposed to have," Hamish repeated. "What happened?" Nessie leaned forward conspiratorially. "There was some sort of scandal. We don't know the details, but she left Edinburgh suddenly. Came here to escape it, we think." "To escape it," Jessie said. Before Hamish could ask more, his mobile phone rang. It was Donald MacLeod, the pharmacist, and his voice was urgent. "Constable, you need to come to the church. Moira has agreed to come down and do one final rehearsal, but she is demanding we all be there immediately. The atmosphere is very tense. I am worried someone might do something foolish." "I will be right there," Hamish said. He thanked the Curry sisters and hurried through the darkening streets toward the church. Snow crunched under his feet, and Christmas lights twinkled in windows. It should have been peaceful, festive. Instead, Hamish felt like he was walking toward a powder keg with a lit fuse. The church was blazing with light when he arrived, and he could hear the organ playing inside. He pushed open the door and stepped into what felt like a battlefield before the first shot is fired. The choir stood in their usual places, faces grim and determined. Moira was at the front, her back ramrod straight, her expression unreadable. Archie Grant sat at the organ, his old hands moving over the keys with practiced ease. Reverend Morrison hovered near the altar, wringing his hands. "Ah, Constable Macbeth," Moira said when she saw him. "Come to make sure we don't kill each other. How thoughtful." Several choir members flinched at her choice of words. Hamish noticed that Elsa Murray, who had quit the previous day, was back, her face set in lines of stubborn determination. "Miss Blackwood has agreed to conduct one final rehearsal," Morrison said nervously. "If it goes well, the Christmas Eve service will proceed as planned." "If it goes well," Moira corrected coldly, "which means if you all finally decide to take this seriously." The rehearsal that followed was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of Hamish's life. He sat in a pew near the back, ostensibly to keep the peace, but really just to witness the slow-motion car crash of human relations. Moira was merciless. She stopped the choir every few measures, criticising pitch, timing, blend, diction. Young Jamie Ferguson looked close to tears. Donald MacLeod's jaw was clenched so tight, Hamish worried about his teeth. Fiona Bruce had spots of angry colour in her cheeks, but the most telling reaction came from Archie Grant. The old organist, who had been patient and professional through 3 years of Moira's tyranny, finally snapped. When Moira criticised his tempo for the 3rd time, he stopped playing and stood up from the bench. "That is enough," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I have been playing this organ for 40 years, girl. I was making music when you were still in nappies. I will not be spoken to like an incompetent child." Then play like an adult, Moira shot back. Your tempo is dragging like a funeral march. Perhaps that is appropriate, Archie said quietly, given that you are murdering any joy this choir once had. The silence that followed was deafening. Moira's face went white, then red. Get out, she hissed. You are fired. You cannot fire me, Archie said. I volunteer my time, remember, I quit. He gathered his music and walked out of the church with as much dignity as a man could muster. The door closed behind him with a decisive thud. Moira turned back to the choir, her hands shaking. Anyone else want to quit, she asked. Anyone else want to abandon the music because it's too hard? Go on then. Leave. See if I care. No one moved. They were trapped, Hamish realised. Trapped by their own love of tradition, by their desire to have a Christmas Eve service, by years of being told that Moira was the only one who could make the music beautiful. That is what I thought, Moira said with grim satisfaction. Now, from the top, and this time, try to remember you are singing about the birth of Christ, not the death of your cat. The rehearsal continued, but Hamish could feel the hatred in the room like a physical presence. These people had reached their breaking point. If something did not change soon, the consequences would be dire. Chapter 5. The night bells toll. The rehearsal finally ended at 9 o'clock, with Moira dismissing the choir with a curt reminder that tomorrow's Christmas Eve service would begin at 11, and they were expected to arrive by 10 for a final warm-up. The choir members filed out in silence, too exhausted even for their usual complaints. Hamish waited until they had all gone before approaching Moira. She was gathering her music, her movements jerky and tense. You pushed them too hard tonight, he said quietly. You may have pushed them past what they can forgive. Good, Moira said without looking at him. Perhaps they will finally understand what I'm trying to achieve here. What are you trying to achieve? Hamish asked. Because from where I stand, it looks like you are trying to drive everyone away. She whirled on him, and he was shocked to see tears in her eyes. I'm trying to create something perfect, she said, her voice breaking. Just one perfect thing in my entire wasted life. Is that so wrong? Hamish's anger evaporated, replaced by pity. No, he said gently, but you cannot build perfection on the pain of others. She turned away, swiping at her eyes. You wouldn't understand, she said. No one here understands. You are all so satisfied with mediocrity, so content with good enough. Well, I cannot be. I will not be. What happened to you? Hamish asked. What are you running from? For a long moment, he thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was supposed to be a soloist. Concert halls, recordings, everything. I had the voice, the training, everything. And then I lost it. One day, my voice just broke. Damage to the vocal cords, the doctors said. Irreversible. So I came here to teach, to create beauty through others since I could no longer create it myself. But they don't care. None of them care enough to be excellent. So you punish them for not caring as much as you do, Hamish said. Yes, Moira said fiercely. Is that so terrible? To expect people to care about something beautiful, to try for something beyond their comfortable little lives. It is when it makes them hate the music instead of love it, Hamish said. She stared at him, and for a moment he thought he had reached her. Then her face hardened again. Get out, Constable, she said. I need to prepare for tomorrow, and whatever you think of my methods, the Christmas Eve service will be beautiful. You will see. Hamish left reluctantly, glancing back to see her standing alone in the empty church, surrounded by tinsel and holly and all the trappings of joy, looking like the loneliest person in the world. He walked home through snow that was falling heavily now, lugs trotting beside him. The village was quiet, houses dark as people slept in preparation for Christmas Eve. But Hamish felt uneasy, as if something terrible was gathering just beyond his vision. He was awakened at 6 the next morning by a phone call from Reverend Morrison. The man's voice was high and panicked. Hamish, you must come to the church immediately. It is Moira. She is... Oh God, she is dead. Hamish was out of bed and dressed in minutes, his mind racing. He drove to the church through the pre-dawn darkness, snow still falling, his headlights cutting through the gloom. The church door was open and Morrison stood in the entrance, his face grey with shock. Behind him, Hamish could see several choir members, all looking equally horrified. "Where is she?" Hamish asked, already dreading the answer. Morrison pointed upward with a shaking hand. "The bell tower. I came early to prepare for the service and saw the tower door open. I went up to close it and found. He couldn't finish." Hamish squeezed his shoulder and headed for the tower stairs, pulling out his mobile to call for backup as he climbed. The stone steps seemed to go on forever, spiralling up into the cold darkness. The bell chamber door stood open. Hamish stepped through and stopped dead. Moira Blackwood lay on the wooden floor beneath the great bell, her face purple, her eyes bulging. Around her neck, wound tight enough to cut into the skin, was a length of silver tinsel. The Christmas decorations that had been stacked in the corner were scattered everywhere, as if there had been a struggle. Hamish's trained eye took in the scene. This was no accident, no suicide. The tinsel was knotted in a way that suggested someone else had pulled it tight from behind. The position of the body, the scattered decorations, the scratch marks on Moira's hands where she had tried to pull the tinsel away, all pointed to murder. He backed out of the room, carefully preserving the scene, and descended the stairs with a heavy heart. At the bottom, Morrison and the choir members waited, their faces anxious. "I am afraid it is murder," Hamish said quietly. "The church is now a crime scene. I need all of you to wait in the parish hall while I make the necessary calls." "Murder," Morrison whispered. But who would? Who could? Hamish looked at the choir members, all of whom had been at last night's brutal rehearsal, all of whom had reason to hate Moira Blackwood. "That," he said grimly, "is what I need to find out." As the shocked parishioners filed toward the parish hall, Hamish stood in the nave of the church, surrounded by Christmas decorations and the echo of carols not yet sung. Somewhere in this village, someone had decided that Moira Blackwood had pushed them too far. Someone had wrapped tinsel around her throat and squeezed until her tyranny ended forever. And that someone was very likely standing not 50 feet away from him right now, waiting to see if they had gotten away with murder. Chapter 6. Discord in the choir. By 8 o'clock, the church was swarming with police. Blair had arrived from Strathbane, red-faced and bellowing about incompetent constables who couldn't keep a simple choir director alive. The scene of crime officers were processing the bell tower, and the police surgeon was examining Moira's body. Hamish had cordoned off the parish hall, where the choir members who had arrived early for the service sat in shocked silence. Through the window, he could see the growing crowd of villagers gathering outside, drawn by the police vehicles and the news that something terrible had happened. Inside the hall, Hamish studied the faces of his suspects. Because that's what they were now. All of them. Anyone who had been at last night's rehearsal had motive, and he needed to determine who had opportunity. There was Donald MacLeod, the pharmacist, looking pale and shaken. Fiona Bruce, the doctor's wife, sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Young Jamie Ferguson was crying quietly, comforted by his mother who had arrived shortly after the police. Elsa Murray stared at the floor, her expression unreadable. And there, sitting slightly apart from the others, was Archie Grant, the organist who had quit in fury the night before. Hamish approached him first. The old man looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I know what you are thinking, Constable," Archie said quietly. "I made a scene last night. I threatened her, in front of witnesses. And now she is dead." "I'm not thinking anything yet," Hamish said, pulling up a chair. "But I do need to ask, where were you this morning between midnight and 6? "Home in bed," Archie said. "Alone. My wife died 5 years ago. There is no one to vouch for me." "When did you leave the church last night?" Hamish asked. "Immediately after I quit. Around 9:15, perhaps. I went home, had a whiskey and went to bed. I did not kill her, Constable. I will not pretend I am sorry she is dead, but I did not kill her." Hamish made notes, then moved on to Donald MacLeod. The pharmacist was more composed than Archie, but there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of barely controlled emotion. "I stayed until the rehearsal ended at 9, Donald said. "Then I went home. My wife can confirm that. I did not leave the house again until I came here this morning at 6:30 to help set up for the service." "Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Hamish asked. Donald hesitated. I don't know if this is relevant, but I saw Elsa Murray's car parked near the church when I drove past around 10:30. I'd forgotten something at the pharmacy and had to go back. Her car was there, but I didn't see her. Hamish glanced at Elsa, who had gone very still. He made a note to interview her next. Fiona Bruce had even less to offer. She claimed to have gone straight home after rehearsal, watched television with her husband and gone to bed. Her husband would confirm, she said firmly. But when Hamish spoke to young Jamie Ferguson, a different picture began to emerge. The boy was barely holding himself together, tears streaming down his face as he spoke. I hated her, he sobbed. Everyone knows I hated her. She made every rehearsal a nightmare. Last night, she told me I was ruining her arrangement with my inadequate voice. She said I should quit and save everyone the embarrassment. That must have been very hurtful, Hamish said gently. It was, Jamie said, but I didn't kill her. I would never. I went home after rehearsal and didn't leave my room. My parents will tell you. Did you see anyone else around the church when you left? Hamish asked. Jamie wiped his eyes. I saw Miss Murray. She was sitting in her car in the car park, just sitting there, staring at the church. It was odd. What time was this? Hamish asked. Around 9:30. I remember because I was supposed to be home by 9:30 and I was running late. Hamish thanked him and turned his attention to Elsa Murray. The postmistress met his gaze steadily, but there was something defiant in her expression. Yes, I was here, she said before he could ask. I came back after rehearsal. I was angry, Constable, angrier than I have ever been in my life. I sat in my car and thought about going up there and telling her exactly what I thought of her. But you didn't, Hamish asked. Elsa's composure cracked. I did, she whispered. God help me, I did. I went up to the bell tower around 10:15. The door was unlocked. She was up there, sorting through the decorations. I told her she was a cruel, heartless woman who was destroying something beautiful. I told her she should be ashamed of herself. What did she say? Hamish asked quietly. Elsa's laugh was bitter. She told me I was pathetic, that I had wasted my life in this village, accepting mediocrity, and that I would never understand what it meant to strive for excellence. Then she threw tinsel at me, literally threw it at me and told me to get out. What did you do? Hamish asked. I left, Elsa said. I left her there alive, surrounded by her precious decorations. I went home and cried myself to sleep. But I did not kill her, Constable. I swear to you I did not kill her. Hamish believed her. The woman was too distraught, too obviously horrified by what had happened. But she had been the last person to see Moira alive, as far as he knew, unless someone else had gone up to that bell tower after Elsa left. He was about to continue his questioning when Blair burst into the parish hall, his face even redder than usual. Macbeth, he roared. A word, now. Hamish followed him outside, where Blair rounded on him with characteristic fury. A murdered choir director on Christmas Eve, Blair snarled. This is a disaster. The press will be all over this. I need an arrest, and I need it today. I need time to investigate, Hamish said. You have until tonight, Blair said. If you cannot solve this by then, I am bringing in my own team, and you can go back to finding lost cats. Understood. Hamish nodded, biting back his frustration. Blair wanted a quick arrest, not necessarily the right one. But Hamish was determined to find the truth, even if it took longer than Blair wanted. As Blair stomped away, Hamish stood in the falling snow and thought about what he knew. Moira had been alive at 10:15 when Elsa left her. The body had been found at 6 this morning. That left nearly 8 hours when someone could have gone up to that tower and strangled her with tinsel. The tinsel bothered him. It was theatrical, almost symbolic. Using the Christmas decorations to kill the woman who had been so obsessed with making Christmas perfect. Was that intentional, or simply opportunistic? He needed to look at the bell tower again to see what the crime scene officers had found. But more than that, he needed to understand Moira herself. The woman everyone hated, yes, but also the woman who had stood alone in the church last night, broken by the loss of her own voice, trying desperately to create beauty through others. Somewhere in that tragedy lay the key to her murder. Hamish was certain of it. He just had to find it before Blair's deadline ran out, and an innocent person paid the price for someone else's rage. Chapter 7. Silver Threads and Suspicions. The scene of crime officers had finished their initial examination of the bell tower by mid-morning, and Hamish climbed the narrow stairs once again, this time to study the scene with the benefit of their findings. The police surgeon, Dr. Forsyth, met him at the top. She was a competent woman in her 50s who had worked many crime scenes in the Highlands. Death occurred between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., she said, without preamble. Strangulation by ligature, specifically that tinsel. The killer came from behind, based on the angle of the marks on her neck. Moira would have lost consciousness quickly, death within 2 to 3 minutes. Any sign of a struggle, Hamish asked. Defensive wounds on her hands where she tried to pull the tinsel away, Dr. Forsyth said. And look at this. She pointed to scratches on the wooden floor. Someone dragged boxes around during the attack, probably when Moira was struggling. So, she was ambushed, Hamish said. The killer waited until she was focused on the decorations, then struck from behind. That would be my assessment, Dr. Forsyth agreed. The tinsel was pulled tight and held until she stopped moving. This was not a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this. Hamish looked around the bell chamber. The decorations had been carefully photographed and then removed, but he could picture how they had been. Boxes of tinsel, garlands, the star for the Christmas tree. Someone had known Moira would be up here preparing for the service, or someone had lured her up here. He thanked Dr. Forsyth and descended to find Blair waiting in the nave, tapping his foot impatiently. Well, the detective chief inspector demanded, who did it? The old organist, the postmistress who admitted to being here. I don't know yet, Hamish said. Not good enough, Blair snapped. We have motive, opportunity. The Murray woman was here, admitted to arguing with the victim. Arrest her. She left Moira alive, Hamish protested, and she has no reason to lie about being here if she killed her. Maybe she is double bluffing, Blair said. Or maybe she is stupid. Either way, I want an arrest. Give me until this evening, Hamish said. There's something I'm missing, something that doesn't fit. Blair glared at him. You have until 6 o'clock. Then I am taking over this investigation and you will be writing traffic tickets for the rest of your career. He stomped out, leaving Hamish alone in the church. The constable sat in a pew and tried to organise his thoughts. He had multiple people with motive, several with opportunity, but no clear suspect. The tinsel bothered him. The timing bothered him. Everything about this felt wrong. His mobile phone rang. It was Mrs. Wellington. Hamish, she said, her voice unusually subdued. I thought you should know. I was cleaning out the choir room this morning and I found something odd. A letter addressed to Moira. It must have fallen behind the filing cabinet months ago. What does it say? Hamish asked, his interest sharpening. It is from someone in Edinburgh, Mrs. Wellington said. Someone named Catherine Brennan. Well, you should read it yourself. I will bring it to the station. 20 minutes later, Hamish sat at his desk and read the letter that might change everything. It was dated 6 months ago, just as the Curry sisters had said. Dear Moira, it began. I hope this letter finds you, though I suspect you may not want to hear from me after all these years. I recently learned where you had gone after, everything that happened. I wanted you to know that I never meant for things to end the way they did. When I was chosen for the solo position over you, I didn't know about your condition. I didn't know your voice was damaged. If I had known, I would have spoken up, would have made them reconsider. Your career should not have ended because of me. I carry that guilt every day. I heard you are teaching now, making music through others. That seems fitting for someone with your passion. I hope you have found some peace. Yours, Catherine Brennan. Hamish read the letter 3 times, pieces falling into place. This was what had changed Moira 6 months ago. Not just a reminder of her lost career, but the knowledge that her replacement had not even known about her condition. The randomness of it, the unfairness, must have eaten at her. So she had poured all her frustrated ambition, all her grief over her lost voice, into making this choir perfect. She had pushed them harder and harder, trying to create the excellence she could no longer embody herself. And she had made herself so hated in the process that someone had killed her. But who? That was still the question. Hamish decided to take a different approach. Instead of focusing on who had motive, he would focus on who had the specific knowledge and opportunity to commit this particular murder. The killer had known Moira would be in the bell tower. They had known where the tinsel was kept. They had been able to get close enough to her to attack from behind without alarming her. That suggested someone she knew, someone who had a reason to be in the church late at night. He pulled out his notes and went through them again. Elsa had been there at 10:15, but she had left Moira alive. Who else might have come to the church later? His phone rang again. This time it was Archie Grant. "Constable," the old man said. "I have been thinking about last night. There is something I should tell you. After I left the church, I couldn't sleep. I was too angry, so I went for a drive to clear my head. Around 11:30, I drove past the church again, and I saw someone going in the side door. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now—" "Who was it?" Hamish asked, his pulse quickening. "I couldn't see clearly," Archie said, "but they were carrying something. It looked like, I don't know, maybe flowers. I thought perhaps someone was leaving them for the Christmas service." "Flowers," Hamish repeated. "Or could it have been a wreath? Or a garland?" Archie paused. "It could have been, yes." "Why?" "Because," Hamish said slowly, an idea forming. "Someone wanted to make sure they had a reason to be in the church late at night. They brought something that would look innocent if they were seen." "But who would think to do that?" Archie asked. "Someone clever," Hamish said. "Someone who knew exactly what they were doing." He thanked Archie and sat back, his mind racing. The killer had planned this carefully. They had brought decorations as cover, gone to the bell tower where they knew Moira would be preparing for the service, and struck when her back was turned. But there was still one piece missing. Why had Moira been in the bell tower so late? She had dismissed the choir at 9, and Elsa had seen her there at 10:15. But why stay so late sorting decorations in a cold bell tower when she could have done it the next morning? Unless she had been waiting for someone. Unless someone had asked her to be there. Hamish grabbed his coat and headed back to the church. Blair's deadline was approaching, but he was close now. He could feel it. The answer was there, hidden in the details of that night, in the choices people had made and the lies they were still telling. He just had to find it before Blair arrested the wrong person and let a killer walk free. Chapter 8. The Final Note. Hamish returned to the church to find Reverend Morrison in his office, sorting through papers with shaking hands. The minister looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. "Reverend," Hamish said gently, "I need to ask you about the bell tower key. How many copies exist?" Morrison looked up, his eyes red from crying. "Just 2. Moira had 1, and I have 1. Mine is kept in my desk drawer." "May I see it?" Hamish asked. Morrison opened his desk drawer and froze. His face went pale. "It is not here," he whispered. I am certain I put it back after I checked the tower last week. But it is gone." "When was the last time you saw it?" Hamish asked, his pulse quickening. Morrison thought. "Tuesday evening, I think." "Yes, I am sure of it." I opened the tower to store some boxes, then locked it again, and returned the key to my drawer. Tuesday. That was 3 days before the murder, which meant someone had stolen the key, giving themselves access to the bell tower. "Who has access to your office?" Hamish asked. Morrison gestured helplessly. "Almost anyone. I rarely lock it. Choir members come and go, parishioners stop by. The key could have been taken by anyone." "But not just anyone would know where you kept it," Hamish said. "It would have to be someone familiar with your office, someone who had been there before." Morrison nodded miserably. "That is true." Hamish thanked him and stepped back into the nave, his mind working. The killer had stolen the key days in advance. They had planned this murder carefully, methodically. This was not a crime of passion, despite the brutality of the method. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. On one of the pews near the front sat a bouquet of white lilies, still fresh. They had not been there earlier. "Reverend Morrison," Hamish called. "Who brought these flowers?" The minister emerged from his office. "I don't know. They were not there this morning when I arrived. Someone must have left them while we were all in the parish hall with the police." Hamish bent down to examine the flowers. There was no card, but wrapped around the stems was a piece of ribbon. Silver ribbon that matched the tinsel used to strangle Moira Blackwood. The killer had come back. They had returned to the scene of the crime to leave flowers. That was bold, almost arrogant. Or, Hamish thought, it was a message. Regret, perhaps. Or a final goodbye to the woman they had killed. He bagged the flowers as evidence and was heading for the door when Fiona Bruce appeared, looking agitated. "Constable," she said, "I need to tell you something. I have been lying." Hamish turned to her. "About what?" "About last night. I did not go straight home. I came back to the church around midnight. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how horrible rehearsal had been, how Moira had humiliated all of us. I wanted to tell her what I thought of her." "Did you see her?" Hamish asked. Fiona shook her head. The church was dark. I assumed she had gone home. I sat in my car for a while, then left. But the side door was unlocked. I remember that because I tried it, thinking I might go in and leave her a note, but I lost my nerve and drove home. "What time did you leave?" Hamish asked. "About 12:30, Fiona said. "Please believe me, I didn't hurt her. I wanted you to know the truth." Hamish studied her face. She was frightened, but she seemed sincere, and her timeline fit with what Archie had seen. Someone entering the church around 11:30. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Don't leave the village." As Fiona hurried away, Hamish stood in the church and felt the pieces sliding into place. The killer had taken the key. They had brought decorations as cover. They had gone to the church around 11:30, when Moira was in the bell tower preparing for the service. They had climbed the stairs, approached her from behind while she was focused on the tinsel, and struck. But there was still something missing. Some final piece that would tell him who had done this. He pulled out his mobile and called the one person who might be able to help. The Curry sisters answered on the first ring, as if they had been waiting for his call. "Ladies," he said, "I need you to think back. When Moira received that letter 6 months ago, was there anyone else at the post office, anyone who might have seen what was in it?" There was a pause, then Nessie spoke. "Fiona Bruce was there. She was posting a package to her sister in Glasgow. She was standing quite close to Moira when she opened the letter." "Close enough to read it?" Hamish asked. "Oh yes," Nessie said. "Quite close enough." "Close enough," Jessie echoed. Hamish thanked them and ended the call, his heart sinking. Fiona Bruce had known about the letter. She had seen Moira's pain 6 months ago, and had watched as the choir director became increasingly cruel and demanding. And Fiona was married to Dr. Bruce, which meant she had access to medical knowledge. She would know exactly how to strangle someone quickly and efficiently. He headed for the Bruce residence, a neat cottage on the outskirts of the village. Dr. Bruce answered the door, looking puzzled. "Is your wife home?" Hamish asked. "She is in the garden," Dr. Bruce said. "Is something wrong?" Hamish found Fiona kneeling by a flower bed, digging in the frozen earth. She looked up when she heard him approach, and he saw knowledge in her eyes. She knew why he was there. "You brought the lilies to the church this morning," he said quietly. Fiona sat back on her heels. "Yes," she said. "I don't know. To say I was sorry, I suppose." "You saw the letter," Hamish said. 6 months ago at the post office. You knew what had broken her." Fiona's eyes filled with tears. "I knew she was in pain. I knew she was lashing out because of it. But that didn't give her the right to hurt all of us. She was destroying something we loved. She had to be stopped." "So you took the Reverend's key," Hamish said. "You planned this for days." "I didn't plan it," Fiona said. "Not really. I took the key on impulse. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how easy it would be, how much better everyone would be without her." "You brought decorations to make it look like you had a reason to be there," Hamish continued. "You went up to the bell tower and found her preparing for the service. You wrapped the tinsel around her neck and pulled until she stopped struggling." Fiona was openly crying now. "It was so fast," she whispered. "I thought I would feel something, remorse or horror, but I just felt relief. Like I had saved us all from her tyranny." "By becoming a murderer yourself," Hamish said sadly. Fiona looked at him with red eyes. "Yes, she said. I suppose I did. Chapter 9. Christmas Morning. Confession. Fiona Bruce sat in the interview room at the Strathbane police station, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she had not touched. Across from her, Hamish Macbeth and a clearly triumphant Detective Chief Inspector Blair waited for her formal confession to be recorded. It was Christmas morning, and instead of singing carols in church, Hamish was watching a woman destroy her life with careful, measured words. I took the key from Reverend Morrison's desk on Tuesday, Fiona said, her voice steady despite the tears that continued to fall. I did not have a plan then. The opportunity presented itself, and I took it. I told myself I would return it, that I would not actually use it. But you did, Blair said, his tone satisfied. Yes, Fiona said. I kept thinking about the rehearsal the night before. How cruel Moira had been. How she had made Jamie cry. How she had driven Archie to quit. How she seemed to take pleasure in our pain. And I thought, why should we all suffer because one woman is bitter about her own failures? So you decided to kill her, Blair said. I decided to stop her, Fiona corrected. There is a difference. Or at least, I told myself there was. She described her actions in detail. How she had waited until her husband went to sleep, then slipped out of the house around 11. How she had brought a wreath she had made for the church, so if anyone saw her, she would have an excuse for being there. The side door was unlocked, she continued. I went in and saw the light on in the bell tower. I knew she was up there. I climbed the stairs and found her sorting through the decorations, muttering to herself about the choir's incompetence. What happened next? Hamish asked gently. I called her name, Fiona said. She turned around and looked annoyed to see me. She asked what I wanted, as if I were an interruption to something important. And I just snapped. I saw the tinsel in her hands, and I thought about how she used Christmas, this season of joy, as a weapon against us. So I grabbed a piece of tinsel from the box behind her, and I put it around her neck. From behind, Hamish said. Fiona nodded. She tried to fight, but I am stronger than I look. Years of gardening, I suppose. I held on until she stopped moving. Then I laid her down on the floor and went home. My husband never knew I had left. Why the flowers this morning? Hamish asked. Fiona looked at him with something like gratitude in her eyes. Because despite everything, I did not want to hate her. I wanted to remember that she was a person in pain, not a monster. The flowers were, I suppose, my way of asking her forgiveness. Dr. Bruce arrived shortly after, his face ashen when he learned what his wife had done. He stood outside the interview room, staring through the glass at Fiona as if she were a stranger. I didn't know, he kept saying to Hamish. I had no idea she was struggling so much. I should have seen it. She hid it well, Hamish said. They all did. The whole choir was suffering in silence. Blair, having gotten his confession, was in high spirits. He clapped Hamish on the shoulder with false camaraderie. Good work, Macbeth, he said, though you cut it a bit fine with my deadline. Next time, arrest the obvious suspect sooner and save us all some time. The obvious suspect was innocent, Hamish reminded him. Details, Blair said airily. The important thing is we got our killer. The press will be pleased. As Blair strutted away to give interviews, Hamish returned to Lochdub through snow that had finally stopped falling. The village was waking to Christmas morning, children excited about presents, families preparing for dinner. But at the church, the Christmas Eve service had been cancelled, and a murder investigation had taken its place. Reverend Morrison met him at the church door, looking lost. What do we do now? The minister asked. The choir is devastated. Half of them feel guilty, as if they are somehow responsible for pushing Fiona to this. They are not responsible, Hamish said firmly. Fiona made her own choices. The fact that she was provoked does not excuse what she did. But Moira was cruel, Morrison said. We all knew it. We all complained about it. Does that make us complicit? No, Hamish said. It makes you human. Moira's behaviour was inexcusable, but so is murder. One does not justify the other. Inside the church, the remaining choir members had gathered, drawn together by shared grief and shock. Ailsa Murray was there, and Donald MacLeod, and young Jamie Ferguson. Archie Grant sat at the organ, his hands resting on the keys but making no sound. They looked up when Hamish entered, their faces showing a mixture of emotions. Sadness for Moira, despite everything. Shock at Fiona's actions. Guilt for the resentment they had all harboured. "I know this is difficult," Hamish said, "but you need to understand that what happened was not your fault. Fiona made a choice, a terrible choice, and she will pay the consequences. But the rest of you, you are victims of Moira's cruelty, not perpetrators of her murder." "It doesn't feel that way," Elsa said softly. "I said I wanted to string her up with decorations. I said it right in front of you. Saying something in anger and doing it are very different things," Hamish said. "You are not murderers. Don't let Fiona's actions convince you otherwise." Archie Grant spoke up from the organ bench. "What happens to the choir now? Do we just stop?" "That is up to you," Hamish said. "But I would suggest that the best memorial to this tragedy would be to create something beautiful. Not perfect, not driven by fear or cruelty, but beautiful in its imperfection. That is what music should be." The choir members looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then Archie's hands moved on the keys, and the first notes of Silent Night filled the church. One by one, the others joined in. Their voices were shaky at first, uncertain. But as the carol progressed, they found their harmony. It was not perfect. There were missed notes and wavering pitches, but it was heartfelt and true, and it filled the church with a kind of grace that Moira's rigid perfectionism had never achieved. Hamish stood at the back and listened, feeling the weight of the case settle on his shoulders. Two women destroyed by pride and pain, a choir torn apart by ambition and cruelty, and himself, left to pick up the pieces and try to make sense of senseless tragedy. When the carol ended, he slipped out into the Christmas morning and headed for home, where Luggs waited with patient loyalty and the promise of a quiet day by the fire. Chapter 10. After the Carols Fade. 3 months had passed since Moira Blackwood's murder, and Lochdub was slowly finding its rhythm again. Fiona Bruce had been sentenced to 12 years for manslaughter, the court accepting that her crime, while inexcusable, had been partially provoked by sustained emotional abuse. Dr. Bruce had sold their cottage and moved away, unable to bear the memories. The choir had continued, though in a much different form. Archie Grant had taken over as director, bringing a gentle patience that was the opposite of Moira's harsh perfectionism. They sang simply now, without elaborate arrangements or impossible standards, and somehow the music was better for it. Hamish stood at his kitchen window on a March morning, watching the snow melt from the hills and the first hints of spring returning to the Highlands. Luggs sat at his feet, hopeful as always that bacon might appear. The case still bothered him sometimes, late at night, when sleep would not come. He thought about Moira, driven by the loss of her own voice to push others beyond their limits. He thought about Fiona, a good woman who had let resentment build until it exploded into violence. He thought about how thin the line was between frustration and murder, between wanting someone gone and actually making it happen. His mobile phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Mrs. Wellington. "Hamish," she said cheerfully, "the choir is performing at the Easter service next month, and we were hoping you might join us. We are short a baritone, and I remember you singing quite nicely at the Caelid last year." Hamish smiled despite himself. "I'm not much of a singer, Mrs. Wellington." "Neither are the rest of us," she said. "That is rather the point. We are not trying to be perfect anymore. We are just trying to enjoy making music together." "In that case," Hamish said, "I suppose I could give it a try." "Wonderful," Mrs. Wellington said. "Rehearsal is Thursday evening. And Hamish, thank you. For everything you did, for finding the truth, even when it was difficult." After she hung up, Hamish stood for a moment longer at the window. The truth had been difficult indeed, but it was still the truth, and that mattered. He had learned, through this case, that perfection was often the enemy of goodness. Moira had pursued perfection so relentlessly that she had destroyed the joy in music for those around her, and Fiona, in her own way, had pursued the perfect solution to her problem, not realizing until too late that murder was never the answer. The choir now sang imperfectly, joyfully, humanly. And that, Hamish thought, was as it should be. That evening, he walked down to the church for his first rehearsal. The building looked different in spring twilight, softer somehow, less imposing. Inside, the choir members greeted him warmly. They had been through fire together, and it had forged a bond that was stronger than any that Moira's tyranny had created. Archie Grant welcomed him with a gentle handshake. "No pressure, Constable," the old organist said. "We are here to enjoy ourselves. If you miss a note or forget the words, no one will scold you." "That is a relief," Hamish said sincerely. They rehearsed Easter hymns, simple and traditional. Hamish's voice blended with the others, not perfectly, but well enough. When he stumbled over a phrase, Elsa Murray beside him just smiled and helped him find his place again. When young Jamie's voice cracked on a high note, everyone laughed kindly and Archie simply gave them the note again. This was what music should be, Hamish realised. Not a weapon, not a tool for control, but a gift shared between imperfect people trying to create something beautiful together. After rehearsal, Donald MacLeod approached him with a shy smile. "We are planning a memorial," he said, "for Moira. Nothing fancy, just a small plaque in the church garden. We thought, despite everything, she deserved to be remembered. She did love music, even if she showed it badly." "I think that is very generous," Hamish said. "We have all made mistakes," Donald said quietly. "Hers were just more visible than most." "And Fiona? Well, she will have a long time to think about hers." "How is Fiona?" Hamish asked. "Getting counselling in prison," Donald said. "Her sister visits regularly. She is, I think, coming to terms with what she did. It will take time." Hamish walked home through streets that smelled of spring, past houses where lights glowed warm in windows. Lugs trotted beside him, content with the world as dogs always were. Back in his cottage, he made tea and sat by the fire, thinking about the strange journey this case had taken him on. From a tyrannical choir director to a desperate murderer, from Christmas carols to tinsel used as a weapon. It had been one of the more unsettling cases of his career, but it had also taught him something valuable about the nature of cruelty and compassion, about the wounds people carry and the ways they try to heal them or inflict them on others. Moira had been wounded by the loss of her voice, and she had wounded others in return. Fiona had been wounded by Moira, and she had lashed out in the most final way possible. The cycle of pain only ended, Hamish thought, when someone chose compassion over revenge, understanding over judgment. The choir had chosen that when they decided to remember Moira with a memorial, instead of just hating her memory. Fiona was choosing it now, accepting her punishment and trying to understand herself better. And Hamish, in his own small way, chose it every day. Trying to understand the people of Lochdub, trying to help them even when they made terrible mistakes, trying to find justice without losing compassion. Outside his window, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the village, the church bells rang the hour, their sound clear and sweet across the loch. There would be no Christmas carols this year sung under Moira's tyrannical direction, no bell tower where tinsel became a murder weapon. Instead, there would be Easter hymns sung with gentle imperfection, a community learning to heal, and a constable who understood that the greatest mysteries were not always the ones you solved, but the ones you learned to live with. Hamish finished his tea, scratched lugs behind his peculiar ears, and settled in for the evening. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own mysteries. But tonight he was content to sit by the fire and listen to the wind off the loch, carrying with it the promise of spring and the hope that even in the darkest moments people could find their way back to the light. The case of the murdered choir director was closed, but its lessons would remain with him, and with Lochdub, for a long time to come. And perhaps that, more than any arrest or conviction, was what justice truly meant.